For thousands of years, humanity lived in a way that other civilizations could only admire. Across the countless star systems they had explored and settled, they had built a life of peace that seemed almost impossible in a galaxy full of ambition, greed, and conflict. Wars between planets, species, and empires were common, and yet humans had managed to avoid them. They had developed a reputation not as warriors, but as careful negotiators, builders, and problem solvers. People from distant worlds respected their way of life. Traders trusted them. Diplomats sought their guidance. Scholars studied their history, trying to understand how a species could survive, grow, and prosper without endless bloodshed. Humanity's approach was simple but powerful. They believed in dialogue first, in listening before speaking, and in reasoning before acting. Their leaders rarely used force unless absolutely necessary, and their scientists, engineers, and citizens focused on growth, education, and innovation. This way of life had taken thousands of years to perfect. Every generation learned from the mistakes of the past, and every generation carried the unspoken rule that no human child should ever be harmed. This principle was sacred. It was more important than borders, than resources, than even alliances. Children represented the future of humanity, the continuation of all the progress and knowledge that had been built for millennia. To touch a child was to touch everything humanity stood for. On any given day, humans moved between planets in peaceful trade missions, exploration programs, and cultural exchanges. Cities floated among the stars on massive space stations, while others thrived on planets with diverse climates and ecosystems. People traveled for education, business, or simply curiosity. Even distant alien civilizations could see that humans were cautious, intelligent, and predictable in the best sense of the word. It was a pattern that others learned to trust. And yet, as perfect as it seemed, there was always a fragility in peace. Peace required constant effort. It required vigilance. It required a deep understanding of limits and boundaries. Humans had learned this lesson countless times. They knew that while their philosophy kept them safe most of the time, there were always forces in the galaxy that were not guided by reason, empathy, or fairness. There were empires and factions that measured success in domination, that saw the universe as a chessboard, where the lives of others were mere pieces to be moved or destroyed. Humans knew this, and that knowledge had shaped them into careful planners, skilled negotiators, and, when necessary, formidable strategists. Even with this awareness, no human could have imagined the shock that would come. The galaxy, which had long seemed predictable in its patterns, suddenly felt colder, sharper, and more dangerous. The first sign was subtle, almost imperceptible. Communications from a routine transport ship carrying human children traveling through a neutral sector disappeared. At first, those monitoring the journey assumed there had been a technical glitch. Ships occasionally failed to transmit signals, and satellites sometimes experienced interference. But as the hours passed, a creeping unease grew among the Human Council and the monitoring agencies. Something felt wrong. Something was not just unusual, it was impossible to ignore. Then, a distress signal arrived. It was broken, fragmented, and unlike anything they had seen before. The signal showed brief flashes of human children, young faces filled with fear and confusion, surrounded by figures in strange uniforms. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving only static. Analysts pored over the signal for hours, trying to determine its origin. Every calculation, every trace led to the same chilling conclusion. The children had not been lost due to an accident. They had been deliberately taken. Humanity had faced dangers before pirates, hostile species, rogue factions, but this was different. This was a direct violation of the rule that no one could harm a human child. It struck at the very heart of what humanity stood for. Parents, educators, and leaders across the human worlds felt the same pang of fear that grew into something stronger, a rising anger that was both personal and collective. For the first time in generations, the calm, measured society found itself forced into a state of alert, not because they sought war, but because they were being pushed into one. The Human Council convened immediately. Every leader, every senior advisor, and every defense strategist gathered to understand what had happened. They studied the transmission, tracing frequencies, checking for anomalies, and scanning regions where the children might have been taken. It was painstaking work, slow and frustrating, but one truth became undeniable. Humanity was facing a deliberate act by someone who had ignored centuries of diplomacy, treaties, and respect. Whoever had done this understood one thing, that striking at human children would ignite a response unlike any other. While the council worked, ordinary people on planets and stations could feel the tension. Families clung to each other, teachers watched over students with extra care, and communities began sharing information in hushed tones. Across communications channels, the same question echoed. Why would anyone do this? Was it a warning, a threat, or an experiment? No one knew, and that uncertainty made the fear grow sharper. For all the pride humanity had in its peaceful ways, there was also a history of protecting what mattered most. Every human generation had stories of heroism, of courage, of standing up to impossible odds when the innocent were threatened. And this situation, terrifying as it was, drew out that instinct in every corner of the human worlds. Citizens volunteered for search missions. Scientists offered new technologies for tracking, and navigators scoured star charts for hidden routes. Even those who were far from military or diplomatic roles felt the same pulse of resolve. Humanity would not allow this violation to go unanswered. And yet there was still caution. Humanity had always believed in giving reason a chance. Leaders did not want to rush into violence without understanding who the perpetrators were or why they had acted. They sent messages through diplomatic channels, pleading for information, negotiating quietly with neighboring systems, and attempting to trace the origin of the kidnappers through peaceful means. But as hours became days, the hope that this might be resolved without conflict began to fade. Despite the fear and uncertainty, one fact remained clear. The safety of the children was the highest priority. Every decision, every action, and every plan revolved around that single truth. Parents could not rest, leaders could not rest, and the children themselves were at the center of every thought and strategy. Humanity had survived countless challenges over the centuries, but this was a challenge of a different nature. It was a moral test, a crisis of identity. How could a civilization built on peace and reason respond when that very peace was shattered in such a personal and deliberate way? As the first part of this crisis unfolded, humanity began to awaken from its long era of tranquility. Spaces that had once seemed safe now felt vulnerable. Systems that had once seemed secure now felt exposed. And the realization slowly took hold. Peace, no matter how enduring, could not protect everything. There were lines that, once crossed, demanded a response. And striking at human children, the symbol of the future and hope of an entire species, was a line that could never be ignored. The quiet, thoughtful people who had built 4,000 years of peace now felt the first stirrings of anger, fear, and determination that would soon lead them to a decision that could change the galaxy forever. In every city, every colony, and every station, humans began to prepare not yet for war, but for action, for rescue, and for the impossible task of righting a wrong that had shaken their civilization to its core. Even in the darkest moments of that first realization, humanity held on to one belief, that they would not fail the children, no matter the cost. And it was that belief, unshakable and universal, that would guide every choice they made as the crisis continued to unfold, setting the stage for the decisions and battles that would define the next chapter of their history. The first signs of trouble had already sent ripples across the human worlds, but nothing prepared them for the reality that was slowly emerging. As hours passed since the children's disappearance, it became clear that this was no ordinary accident. Initial hopes that the transport ship had suffered a technical failure or had been caught in a spatial storm faded with every failed attempt to locate it. The calm, ordered approach humanity had relied upon for centuries was now giving way to fear and confusion. Families huddled together. Educators and guardians checked and rechecked every roster, every boarding record, and every system log. Every signal, every minor anomaly, became a potential clue. When the first distress signal arrived, it was brief and fragmented, barely more than static on the monitors. Yet it carried a weight far heavier than anything humanity had experienced in generations. The images were unclear, broken into flashing frames of terrified faces and strange masked figures. The children were huddled together, visibly frightened, and surrounded by people in uniforms that no human had seen before. The scene moved too quickly to interpret fully, but there was no mistaking the terror. Something deliberate had been done. The captors had hidden their identities, scrambled their markings, and chosen a location far from any human-controlled space. This was not a random act. It was calculated, precise, and deeply cruel. Every analyst, every observer, and every concerned parent who saw the footage shared the same reaction: disbelief, then horror, then a rising anger. Humans had spent centuries negotiating with other species, avoiding conflict and maintaining peace across hundreds of systems. They had avoided countless wars, mediated disputes between rival factions, and learned the hard way how fragile peace could be. But even in the most dangerous corners of the galaxy, one rule had remained absolute: no one harmed human children. That rule had kept them safe, earned them respect, and built a reputation that made other civilizations wary of crossing them. To break that rule was to break the foundation of human dignity itself. The Human Council convened immediately, bringing together representatives from every major system, leaders who had spent their entire lives devoted to negotiation and governance, and advisors who had trained for emergencies, but had never faced one like this. The meeting room, usually calm and orderly, was filled with tension. Screens displayed fragments of the transmission, magnified images, and traced signals. Maps of the galaxy were dotted with possible locations, each one analyzed and reanalyzed. Despite the advanced technology at their disposal, nothing could provide certainty. Whoever had taken the children had planned it well. While the council debated and calculated, ORDINAR, why humans across countless planets and stations felt the weight of the event. Parents clutched their children tighter, teachers kept closer watch, and communities shared every piece of news, rumor, or report with caution. Even distant systems, where humans had only minor settlements, felt the anxiety spread. Humanity had grown used to a life of calm, to the gentle rhythm of trade, education, and exploration. That rhythm had been shattered, replaced with uncertainty, fear, and a sense of violation so deep it touched every heart. Despite the fear, the Human Council acted quickly, determined to protect their own and uncover the truth. Teams of scientists and engineers worked tirelessly, developing tracking programs and analysis algorithms. Navigators scoured every chart, every corridor, every hidden path through space where a ship could disappear without leaving a trace. Diplomats reached out to neighboring civilizations, sending messages of inquiry, protest, and, where possible, negotiation. Every measure was taken to find the children without escalating into violence, because humanity, even in crisis, clung to the principles that had preserved them for millennia. But as the hours turned into days, it became painfully clear that diplomacy alone would not resolve the situation. Signals were deliberately blocked or scrambled. Attempts to trace the origin of transmissions led to dead ends. The captors were careful, experienced, and intent on keeping the children hidden. Humanity had faced many challenges before, but this was different. This was personal. It was an attack not on a system, a planet, or even an ideology. It was an attack on innocence itself, on the very essence of what humans considered untouchable. During this time, fear and determination grew side by side. Citizens who had lived their lives in quiet routines suddenly found themselves volunteering, coordinating searches, and supporting emergency response teams. Scientists who usually worked in labs were reassigned to real-time tracking projects, and engineers adapted their knowledge to create advanced reconnaissance drones and stealth sensors. Every human felt the responsibility. Every parent, every teacher, every guardian understood that the safety of these children was now the central priority of their civilization. In the midst of the fear and confusion, one undeniable truth began to emerge. The act had been deliberate. Humans were patient, careful, and methodical, and their analysis left no room for doubt. This was not an accident, and it was not a simple crime. It was a calculated provocation, designed to test humanity, to see how they would react when their most sacred boundary was crossed. That realization ignited a fire within every member of the council, and more importantly, within the hearts of ordinary citizens. Yet even as anger rose, humanity did not immediately turn to violence. They had learned over thousands of years that rash actions could destroy more than they protected. They balanced fear with logic, anger with strategy, and desperation with careful planning. Emergency meetings were held, algorithms were run, and every possible scenario was considered. Could the children be rescued without risking their lives? Could the captors be negotiated with? Could they identify weaknesses in the enemy's defenses? Every question was explored, every possibility tested, until the council understood one clear fact. Action would be required. The children were not just innocents. They represented the continuation of human civilization. Their capture was not a crime against a single family or a single planet. It was an assault on the entire species, a violation of the principles that had guided humanity for thousands of years. As the council watched images of the frightened children, their faces illuminated by the flickering lights of unknown rooms, they understood that every choice they made from this point forward carried immense weight. Across human space, communities began to organize. People who had never met worked together to coordinate search parties, track unusual signals, and share intelligence. Even minor settlements contributed, offering information about unusual ships, unknown transmissions, and strange activity at the edges of human-controlled regions. The sense of urgency grew, and it became clear that no single system, no single planet, could resolve this alone. Humanity had to act as one unified species, combining every resource, every skill, and every piece of knowledge they had accumulated over millennia. At the same time, parents and guardians across human worlds struggled with the helplessness that came with distance. They could not be with the children, could not hold them, could not calm their fear. They had to trust that their leaders, scientists, and neighbors would do everything possible to bring them home. That trust, fragile yet resilient, became a driving force. It reminded every human of the stakes. This was not a matter of politics or borders or trade. This was a test of humanity itself. Could they protect their own when every resource was stretched to the limit? Could they rescue the innocent without becoming consumed by the anger that naturally arose in such circumstances? Even as strategies were drawn and drones launched, the council knew that time was slipping. The longer the children remained in enemy hands, the greater the risk. Humans could not allow hesitation to dictate the outcome. Plans had to be precise, decisions had to be swift, and coordination had to be perfect. Any mistake could cost lives, and in this case, there was no margin for error. Throughout all of this, one principle guided every action. Humanity would not fail the children. Every leader, every parent, every citizen understood that the children were not just victims. They were symbols of hope, continuity, and everything humans valued most. This understanding inspired not only determination, but ingenuity. Scientists devised new tracking methods, engineers constructed rapid response ships, and navigators developed plans to explore uncharted regions of space. Every mind worked toward one goal: bring the children home safely, no matter the obstacles. Even in the quiet moments, when no one was speaking or moving, the weight of the situation pressed on everyone. Humans had never faced a test like this before. They had survived countless crises, from natural disasters to political betrayals, but the abduction of their children was a challenge of a fundamentally different kind. It was an emotional, moral, and strategic puzzle all at once, one that demanded unity, courage, and creativity. And so, as the first days turned into nights and nights into additional hours of vigilance, humanity began to prepare for whatever might come next. They would search, they would analyze, and they would protect, but they would also prepare for the reality that sometimes peace alone was not enough. The calm, reasoned approach that had guided them for millennia would have to coexist with decisive, focused action. And deep in every human heart, a quiet but burning determination. Days had passed since the disappearance of the children, and humanity had not rested for a single moment. Every world, every station, every fleet was mobilized in some way. Teams of analysts worked around the clock, combing through trillions of data points, signals, and spatial scans. Navigators traced thousands of possible routes the transport ship could have taken, while scientists and engineers developed new tools to detect even the faintest traces of life in distant, hidden corners of space. The Human Council, which had once relied primarily on diplomacy and negotiation, now found themselves operating in a crisis unlike anything they had encountered in thousands of years of peace. Yet it was during one of these long, tense sessions that the breakthrough came. A small reconnaissance drone, launched into an uncharted sector, picked up a series of anomalous energy readings. The readings were unlike anything seen before, deliberately masked, highly advanced, and indicating the presence of life forms and machinery in a configuration that suggested both intelligence and intent. The drone followed the signals through layers of space debris, across asteroid fields, and into a hidden pocket of space that had been deliberately concealed from standard galactic scans. There, a structure emerged, a massive, fortified complex unlike any human had ever seen. The images transmitted back to the Human Council were shocking. The complex was a combination of advanced technology and cold military efficiency. There were containment units, surveillance systems, and areas that appeared to be laboratories. The most chilling part, however, was the unmistakable presence of the children. They were alive, but confined, watched constantly by guards in uniforms and masks that obscured their identities. The captors moved with purpose, never making a sound in the images that could be detected. They seemed trained, disciplined, and fully aware of the power and value of their captives. As the council and their analysts studied the footage, the realization hit everyone at the same time. This was no ordinary crime. This was no random act of aggression. The captors were conducting experiments, studying the children, trying to understand something about humanity itself. Intelligence reports began to confirm suspicions. The children were being examined for cognitive abilities, biological responses, and even psychological resilience. The captors were attempting to uncover the secrets of humanity, to learn why humans had become so advanced, so fast, and so capable of surviving in a galaxy filled with conflict. The implications were staggering. For the first time, humans were confronted with a challenge that was not just a threat to their lives or their territory, but to the very essence of what made them human. Every parent, every teacher, Every leader understood that these children were more than individuals. They represented the future of the species. The knowledge, culture, and history that humanity had built over thousands of years were symbolically at risk because these children were being used as tools for study by an unknown and powerful force. Despite the shock, humanity did not panic. Fear was present, certainly, but it was accompanied by a fierce determination that had defined humans for millennia. The images of the children, frightened yet resilient, sparked an unspoken promise within every person who viewed them. They would not allow harm to come to them. Every piece of technology, every strategy session, and every communication was now focused on one goal: to ensure the safety and return of the children. The council convened for another emergency session, this time with the evidence in front of them. The room was heavy with tension. Advisors debated, strategists analyzed, and parents of other children watched in anxious silence. Every possible action was weighed. Diplomacy had failed to yield results. The captors had not responded to messages, and their location was hidden deep within the territory of a powerful empire that had always been seen as stable, predictable, and controlled. Yet here, in this remote, secret sector, they had operated with impunity. The question on everyone's mind was clear. Why did they do it? Why target humanity's children, the one boundary that had never been crossed in 4,000 years of peace? The answer slowly emerged from intelligence reports. The captors were studying the children not out of malice alone, but out of fear and curiosity. Humanity had achieved technological and strategic growth at a pace that no other civilization could match. The captors wanted to understand the human mind, the human ability to adapt, and the human capacity for innovation. In their own way, they sought to learn what made humans so unique, so capable, and perhaps so dangerous. Even with this knowledge, the moral weight of the act could not be ignored. The captors had violated the most sacred law of humanity, the protection of children. No negotiation, no treaty, no diplomacy could excuse this. The Human Council understood that words alone would not be enough. Their response would have to be measured, precise, and above all, effective. The Council's focus shifted from understanding the captors' motivations to planning the rescue of the children. Every possible resource was mobilized. Fleets were readied for rapid deployment. Reconnaissance drones were upgraded for stealth and speed. Scientists worked on tracking systems that could detect even the most advanced cloaking technology. Every aspect of human ingenuity was turned toward one objective: bring the children home safely. Across human worlds, the news of the findings spread like wildfire. Citizens who had lived their lives in calm, predictable routines now felt a surge of urgency and responsibility. Parents volunteered for support missions. Engineers and scientists contributed their skills to develop specialized equipment. Teachers and caregivers organized communities to assist in the search, offering intelligence, resources, and logistical help. Even those far from the front lines understood the importance of unity. Humanity, as a species, could not afford division when the stakes were so high. At the same time, the emotional weight of the situation pressed on everyone. Families imagined the fear of the children, the confusion they must be feeling, and the unknown dangers surrounding them. Human empathy, a trait that had long been celebrated as one of the species' greatest strengths, became both a guiding force and a source of tension. Leaders had to balance their anger and desire for immediate action with the need for careful, calculated strategies that would not endanger the lives of the very people they sought to protect. The evidence from the drone footage also revealed something unsettling. The captors were not just hiding the children, they were preparing them for long-term containment and experimentation. The facility was heavily fortified, with multiple layers of defense, advanced monitoring systems, and personnel trained in tactics that suggested a highly organized and experienced force. The scale of the operation confirmed what the Council had feared. The captors were prepared for any human attempt to intervene. Every plan for rescue would have to be precise, coordinated, and flawless. There could be no mistakes, no underestimations. The lives of the children depended on it. Despite the daunting challenge, humanity's determination only grew stronger. The images of the children, the knowledge of their suffering, and the understanding of what was at stake created a unity and focus that had rarely been seen before. Humanity, known for its peaceful nature, now faced a moment that demanded courage, creativity, and unwavering resolve. The Council, aware of the gravity of the situation, began drafting multiple strategies for rescue. They considered stealth operations, rapid strikes, diversionary tactics, and negotiation attempts. Every approach was evaluated not only for effectiveness, but for the safety of the children. One of the most striking aspects of this crisis was the way it brought out the best in humanity. Scientists collaborated with engineers in unprecedented ways. Navigators and strategists developed new methods of approaching hidden locations in space. Citizens across countless systems volunteered for support roles, providing intelligence, monitoring communications, and assisting with logistics. Every individual, regardless of background or skill, understood their role in the larger mission. The collective effort became a testament to the resilience, ingenuity, and determination of the human species. As the Council continued its planning, a deeper understanding began to form. The captors' intent, while cruel and invasive, had a logic rooted in fear and curiosity. They sought to understand humanity because they recognized the species' potential. They knew that humans were capable of extraordinary growth, rapid adaptation, and remarkable strategic thinking. In a way, this recognition validated what humanity had always known. They were unique in the galaxy, not because of violence or domination, but because of intelligence, cooperation, and the ability to create solutions in even the most challenging circumstances. Yet recognition alone did not excuse the act. Humanity could not allow this violation to go unanswered. The safety of the children and the preservation of their values were paramount. The Council realized that they now stood at a crossroads. One path led to careful planning, measured actions, and a possible rescue with minimal risk. The other, if mishandled, could escalate into a conflict that might engulf entire systems. Every choice carried weight, every delay carried risk, and every action had consequences. Through it all, one principle remained clear: the children must be protected. They were not pawns, not experiments, not symbols for negotiation. For thousands of years, humanity had lived with one guiding principle: peace was more valuable than power. Wars had been fought, of course, in the distant past, but the last 4,000 years had been defined by careful diplomacy, cooperation, and the measured resolution of conflict. Humans had become known across the galaxy not as conquerors, but as protectors, builders, and negotiators. Their fleets were powerful, their technology advanced, and their minds brilliant, yet they had chosen restraint. Peace was not weakness, it was wisdom. And yet, all of that wisdom was now tested in a way that no human could have anticipated. The abduction of their children had shattered the calm that humanity had cultivated for millennia. It was not just a crime. It was a violation of the one rule that had always been untouchable. No one harmed a human child. That boundary had protected families, colonies, and civilizations for generations. Now that line had been crossed, and every parent, every leader, and every citizen felt the weight of it. The images of the frightened children, locked in an unknown place and watched by unknown captors, burned in the minds of those who saw them. Humanity was faced with a question they had never had to ask before: how far would they go to protect their own? The Human Council convened for an emergency meeting that would change the course of history. Leaders from every major system, advisors who had spent their lives in careful negotiation, and commanders who had trained for hypothetical wars that had never come together filled the grand chamber. The air was thick with tension, every face a mask of concern, anger, and determination. They had spent thousands of years avoiding war, yet here they were, confronted with an act so deliberate and so cruel that patience alone would not suffice. Every word spoken, every argument made, was weighed against the stakes, the safety of the children and the integrity of humanity itself. For days they debated. Diplomacy, negotiation, stealth operations, covert strikes, all options were considered. Humanity had never wanted conflict, but now they faced a situation that demanded action. Some argued for caution, fearing that a misstep could endanger the children further or trigger a wider galactic war. Others argued that waiting any longer would be a betrayal, that hesitation in the face of such cruelty was unacceptable. Each side was passionate, but in the background, the faces of the children from the reconnaissance images haunted every decision. The Council knew that this was no longer about ideals or strategy alone. This was about morality, about instinct, about protecting what could not be replaced. Finally, after hours of deliberation, a consensus began to form. Humanity could no longer remain passive. 4,000 years of peace, though noble, could not be used as an excuse to allow harm to continue. The abduction of the children had crossed a line that could never be forgiven, a line that demanded a decisive response. The decision was not made lightly. Every leader understood that breaking peace could have consequences for decades, even centuries. Trade routes could be threatened, alliances strained, and rival empires provoked. Yet the risk of inaction was far greater. If they did nothing, the children could be lost, and the very principles that had guided humanity for millennia would be violated. With the decision made, the Council moved quickly. Orders were issued to prepare fleets for rapid deployment. Ships that had been in peaceful orbit around distant worlds were recalled and refitted for possible combat operations. Scientists and engineers worked day and night, modifying drones, sensors, and communication systems to support the mission. Every step was planned with precision. Humanity had never gone to war lightly, and even now, the objective was not conquest but rescue. Every strategy, every maneuver, and every resource was directed toward a single goal: bring the children home safely. Meanwhile, across human worlds, the decision reverberated like a wave of energy. Citizens who had never handled weapons or served in military operations found themselves contributing in other ways. Families volunteered supplies, communities organized support networks, and young adults trained with rapid response units. Humanity's collective effort was unprecedented. This was not a war for territory or power. It was a war of necessity, a war to reclaim what was theirs, and to restore the moral balance that had been shattered. At the same time, the emotional weight of the decision pressed heavily on everyone. Parents imagined the fear and loneliness the children must be feeling, and every adult felt a renewed sense of responsibility. Humanity had survived countless challenges before: environmental disasters, political upheavals, and conflicts on the fringes of their space. But this was different. This was intimate. This was personal. Every life, every choice, and every action mattered in ways that went far beyond strategy or diplomacy. Humanity was about to enter a situation where their greatest strength, their ability to act collectively and wisely, would be tested like never before. Despite the gravity of the moment, there was a sense of unity that had rarely been seen. Across the thousands of systems, citizens, scientists, and leaders were aligned in purpose. Humans, by nature, had learned to adapt and innovate in the face of challenges. This crisis, as severe as it was, brought out the very best in their species. Engineers devised new tracking devices to locate hidden bases. Navigators charted secret routes through unmonitored space. Strategists ran simulations to anticipate every possible response from their captors. Every human skill, every ounce of creativity and courage, was mobilized toward the rescue. Even within the council chambers, the discussions carried both weight and urgency. They debated the morality of their potential actions, knowing that the decision to go to war, even in defense of children, would be remembered for generations. Some feared the consequences of breaking the long-standing peace. Others argued that the principles of humanity, protection of the innocent, defense of life, and preservation of morality demanded action. Slowly but surely, the weight of justice tipped the balance. Humanity could no longer remain passive. They had to act. The preparation for what lay ahead was meticulous. Every ship that would participate in the operation was inspected, upgraded, and tested. Fleets were equipped not only for combat, but also for rapid evacuation and medical support. Scientists developed monitoring systems to track the children's condition in real time. Medical teams were assembled, ready to provide care as soon as the children were recovered. Logistics officers coordinated supply lines across multiple systems, ensuring that every contingency was planned for. Humanity had never faced a mission like this before, but their resolve was unwavering. Meanwhile, ordinary citizens played their part in small but significant ways. Families provided resources, communities shared intelligence, and countless individuals volunteered for support roles. Even those who had never set foot on a fleet vessel understood that their contribution mattered. Humanity, as a collective species, was showing that their strength was not just in technology or strategy, but in unity, cooperation, and shared purpose. The decision to act had awakened a force that had been dormant for centuries, a combination of moral conviction, courage, and relentless determination that would define humanity for generations to come. At the same time, leaders were acutely aware of the psychological toll this situation would have on both the children and themselves. The captors had tried to break the spirits of the children, but humans had learned over millennia to rely on resilience, hope, and connection. Preparations were made to provide comfort, reassurance, and stability as soon as the children were recovered. Mental health teams, counselors, and caregivers were assembled to address the emotional impact of the ordeal. Every detail, from food and shelter to emotional support, was considered in the planning. Humanity's goal was not just to rescue the children, but to restore their sense of safety, belonging, and trust. As the fleets moved into position and the final plans were set, the atmosphere across human systems was a mixture of tension, hope, and determination. Humans had always valued peace, but now they understood that peace alone could not protect what they held most sacred. The decision to break 4,000 years of tranquility was not made lightly, but it was made with clarity, purpose, and a sense of inevitability. Humanity would act, and they would act decisively. Even in the quiet moments before the mission began, there was a shared understanding among all humans involved. The stakes could not be higher. The risks could not be underestimated, and the responsibility could not be ignored. Every decision, every action, and every thought would contribute to the outcome. Humanity's courage, ingenuity, and moral conviction would be tested, and the children's lives depended on their ability to rise to the challenge. And so, as the final preparations were made, humans across countless systems looked to the stars with resolve. They had chosen to act, to break peace in the name of justice, to stand united against a threat that sought to harm their most vulnerable. The decision marked the beginning of a new chapter in human history, one in which the lessons of the past, the strength of the present, and the hope for the future would converge in a single purpose: to rescue their children, defend their principles, and prove that humanity, though peaceful, would never hesitate to protect what was theirs. Humanity's decision to act had set the stage for what would become one of the most extraordinary moments in their history. For millennia, they had avoided war, relying on diplomacy, reason, and careful negotiation to maintain peace across hundreds of star systems. Their fleets had been strong, yes, but they had been used more for protection and deterrence than for actual combat. Yet now, with the abduction of their children and the deliberate violation of everything they held sacred, those fleets moved with purpose, precision, and a newfound intensity. This was not a war for conquest or territory. It was a war for rescue, for justice, and for the preservation of humanity's most cherished values. As the first human fleets approached the region where the captor's hidden facility had been located, every crew member felt the weight of the mission. The children were not simply passengers to be retrieved. They were the embodiment of humanity's hope, future, and survival. Officers gave final briefings, explaining the importance of every maneuver, the objectives of each unit, and the critical need for caution and precision. Scientists monitored the children's vital signs through long-range sensors, while strategists coordinated the timing of every approach. This was a mission that demanded perfection, and every human involved understood that failure was not an option. The Galactic Empire, which had hidden the children and organized the facility, had underestimated humanity. They had assumed that the peaceful species would hesitate, that caution and diplomacy would paralyze them into inaction. They had not accounted for the depth of human resolve, the unity that could emerge when innocence was threatened, or the creativity and adaptability that had allowed humans to survive and thrive in a galaxy full of danger. Humanity's approach was unlike anything the captors had encountered before, deliberate, calculated, and focused entirely on minimizing risk to the children while neutralizing threats as efficiently as possible. The first engagement occurred in the outer perimeter of the captor's territory. Human fleets moved silently through the void, cloaked and nearly undetectable, positioning themselves in optimal locations to intercept patrols and secure critical pathways. The children's location was guarded by multiple layers of defenses, including automated systems, heavily armed personnel, and advanced surveillance networks. Every move had to be precise, every decision weighed for its potential impact. Humanity's fleets, though not used to full-scale war, demonstrated an extraordinary level of coordination, as if the collective knowledge and instinct of thousands of years had been concentrated into a single purpose. Despite the high stakes, humanity approached the engagement with remarkable discipline. Ships focused on disabling enemy defenses rather than destroying life wherever possible. Drones and reconnaissance units were sent ahead to neutralize surveillance systems, block communications, and create safe corridors for the extraction teams. Engineers and technicians on the ships worked in real time to adapt to unexpected obstacles, improvising new tactics when sensors detected hidden traps or unusual energy signatures. Every human involved understood that the mission was not about vengeance, but about safeguarding life. The captors responded with a mixture of surprise and aggression. They had expected the humans to negotiate, to hesitate, to show caution that could be exploited. Instead, they found themselves facing a species that could strike with speed, intelligence, and coordination unlike any they had seen before. Every attempt to reinforce their defenses or relocate the children was met with precise counters. Human fleets moved like a single organism, responding to every change in real time. Patrols were intercepted, communications were disrupted, and pathways cleared for the teams who would enter the facility itself. Inside the hidden facility, the children remained unaware of the scale of the operation unfolding around them. They could hear distant alarms and see lights flickering, but the adults' careful planning had minimized the exposure to danger. Human teams approached quietly, using the knowledge gathered from reconnaissance drones and simulations. Every hallway, every chamber, and every security system had been mapped, analyzed, and rehearsed. The humans moved with the focus of a species, defending not just its own, but its very future. The first extraction teams entered the facility with utmost precision. They neutralized guards silently, bypassed security systems, and moved steadily toward the containment areas. The children, though initially frightened, were reassured by the calm, confident presence of the humans. Officers spoke softly, explaining that they were there to bring them home safely. This reassurance, simple as it was, made a profound difference. Even amidst fear and uncertainty, the children began to trust that rescue had arrived. As teams secured the children, human engineers worked to disable the facility's automated defenses. Explosions were avoided wherever possible, not only to protect life, but also to prevent collapse of critical structures that could endanger the children. Every action was coordinated, every movement planned. Humanity's approach combined intelligence, empathy, and tactical skill in a way that reflected both their technological advancement and their moral values. They were proving that even in war, they could maintain their principles. Outside the facility, human fleets continued to engage the captors' forces, ensuring that reinforcements could not reach the hidden base. Every battle was fought with a balance of aggression and restraint, aimed at neutralizing threats rather than seeking destruction. Pilots and commanders executed maneuvers that combined years of strategic theory with instinctive decision-making, adapting instantly to unexpected developments. Humanity's ability to learn, innovate, and respond under pressure became immediately apparent, catching the captors off guard. The final phase of the extraction was tense. The children had been brought together, secured, and prepared for transport, but the facility's defenses had one last layer, a series of energy barriers and automated defense drones. Human engineers worked furiously to bypass these systems, rerouting power and creating safe passageways. The captors, realizing their control was slipping, attempted desperate measures to reclaim the children, but human teams were already moving in coordination to counter every maneuver. It was a race against time, skill, and fear, and every participant understood that failure was not an option. When the extraction was complete, the children were safely aboard human ships, monitored constantly by medical and psychological teams. Their fear began to ease as they realized they were finally under the protection of their own people. Across the fleets, a quiet sense of relief began to spread. Every ship, every officer, every citizen involved knew that the mission had succeeded. Humanity had achieved what many had thought impossible. They had confronted a powerful adversary, navigated a hostile environment, and rescued their children without unnecessary loss of life. Even as the ships began their return journey to human-controlled space, the magnitude of what had been accomplished was clear. Humanity had demonstrated its capability to respond decisively to threats, to protect its own, and to act with both intelligence and morality under pressure. The captors, though powerful and organized, had underestimated not only the technological skill of humanity, but also their moral resolve. They had learned, too late, that humans were capable of extraordinary unity, creativity, and courage when the lives of their children were at stake. Throughout the journey home, human crews reflected on the lessons of the mission. The children's safety had been the guiding principle of every action, and that focus had allowed them to navigate an extraordinarily dangerous situation successfully. Humanity had discovered new capabilities, not just in technology or strategy, but in coordination, empathy, and resilience. The operation had strengthened bonds across human systems, inspiring confidence and pride in every citizen who had contributed in any way. As the first ships approached human-controlled space, celebrations were subdued but heartfelt. Families reunited, communities cheered, and leaders acknowledged the bravery, skill, and dedication of everyone involved. Yet even in the midst of relief and joy, there was an awareness that the galaxy would remember this event. Humanity had demonstrated that peace was not weakness, but that when innocence was threatened, they could act with unmatched determination and precision. This message would echo across civilizations, shaping perceptions of humanity for generations to come. The rescue mission, though completed, left lasting impressions. It reminded every human that vigilance was necessary, that even in times of peace, threats could arise unexpectedly. It also reinforced the idea that humanity's greatest strength lay not only in technology or strategy, but in unity, courage, and the unwavering protection of what was most precious. The children, now safe, became symbols of resilience, hope, and the enduring spirit of a species that had survived millennia by balancing intelligence, morality, and compassion, even as life gradually returned to normal across human worlds. The lessons of the mission remained. Humanity had proven that they could respond decisively, protect their own, and maintain their principles even under extreme pressure. They had faced an adversary who sought to challenge them, tested their resolve, and emerged victorious, not through destruction alone, but through intelligence, careful planning, and a deep commitment to their values. The galaxy, huh? The children were finally safe. After a mission that had tested every human skill, every ounce of courage, and every principle of unity and morality, the rescue teams returned to human-controlled space. As the fleets approached the first inhabited planets, signals of relief and joy spread across systems. Families reunited, citizens celebrated, and leaders addressed their people with pride and gratitude. Yet amidst the celebration, humanity understood that the experience had left a lasting mark, a reminder of both vulnerability and strength. The ordeal was over, but its lessons would shape generations to come. On board the flagship, the children were tended to by medical teams, counselors, and caregivers who had been specially trained for situations like this. Some of the children were frightened, others tired, and a few were disoriented from the time spent in captivity. Every precaution was taken to ease their fear, provide comfort, and rebuild a sense of safety. Officers spoke softly, explaining where they were, why the mission had been necessary, and how proud humanity was of their resilience. Slowly, the children began to relax, their faces lighting with tentative smiles as they understood that they were finally home. The reunions were emotional. Parents and guardians who had waited anxiously for days or weeks embraced their children, tears mingling with laughter. The citizens who had contributed to the mission, whether through technology, resources, or support, watched from across space as lives that had been threatened were restored. There was a collective sense of relief that transcended individual planets and systems. Humanity had acted as one species, and the results were undeniable. The children were safe, and the mission had proven that even in the face of unprecedented danger, humanity could protect its own dot in the council chambers. Leaders reflected on the operation and the broader consequences. Humanity had broken 4,000 years of peace, not out of desire for conflict, but out of necessity. This was a moment that would be remembered in history, not for war, but for courage, moral clarity, and the protection of innocence. The Council understood that their actions had sent a message across the galaxy. Humans would not tolerate harm to their children, and they would act decisively to defend them. It was a message that carried both warning and hope, illustrating strength balanced with principle. The captors, meanwhile, had suffered a profound defeat. Their hidden facility had been breached, their plans disrupted, and their control over the children dismantled. They had underestimated humanity's capacity for coordination, ingenuity, and moral resolve. Intelligence reports confirmed that the captors would be forced to reevaluate their assumptions about humans, recognizing that peaceful intentions did not mean weakness. Humanity's ability to combine technology, strategy, and empathy in a high-stakes situation had proven formidable. Across the galaxy, whispers began to circulate. Humans were a species to be respected, not underestimated. Even as celebrations continued, humanity remained vigilant. The rescue had demonstrated that threats could emerge unexpectedly, that even centuries of peace could not guarantee safety. Scientists, strategists, and leaders began analyzing every aspect of the mission, seeking ways to improve preparedness for the future. New technologies were developed, lessons were documented, and simulations were refined to anticipate potential challenges. Humanity had learned that strength lay not only in fleets or weapons, but in unity, intelligence, and the unwavering commitment to protect the most vulnerable, the children, now in the care of their families and trained guardians, were given the support they needed to recover from their ordeal. Education resumed, communities rallied around them, and routines were carefully re-established to restore normalcy. Yet the experience had changed them, as it had changed humanity. They had seen courage, ingenuity, and compassion in action. They had witnessed a species come together with purpose and clarity, demonstrating that safety, care, and protection were not abstract ideals, but lived realities. In many ways, the children became symbols of resilience, hope, and the enduring values of human civilization. Across human worlds, citizens reflected on what had been accomplished. The mission had tested every aspect of society, from technology to leadership, from family bonds to community coordination, and humanity had succeeded. The response had demonstrated that humans could act decisively without losing their morality, that they could combine intellect with empathy, and that they could respond to threats with precision and unity. It was a moment of pride, a moment to recognize the best of what humanity could be, and a moment to commit to protecting that legacy for generations to come. Leaders convened once more to discuss the future. They understood that the abduction, while traumatic, had revealed important truths about humanity's role in the galaxy. They were capable of great patience, diplomacy, and peace, but they were equally capable of swift, decisive action when moral imperatives demanded it. Policies were updated, communication networks strengthened, and emergency response systems expanded. Humanity had faced a test, and the lessons learned would ensure that they were never unprepared again. The psychological impact of the mission was profound. Citizens, leaders, and the children themselves understood the importance of trust, courage, and cooperation. Communities that had contributed to the mission felt pride, strengthened bonds, and renewed purpose. Families had witnessed the power of unity and the lengths humans would go to protect their own. Across systems, the collective memory of the mission became part of the cultural identity, a reminder that humanity's strength was rooted not just in technology, but in empathy, collaboration, and moral clarity. Even as normal life resumed, vigilance remained. Patrols were increased along critical routes, intelligence networks were expanded, and contingency plans were refined. Humans understood that peace was not automatic. It was maintained through preparation, cooperation, and shared commitment. The rescue of the children had been a wake-up call, but it was also a demonstration that humanity was capable of extraordinary action when circumstances demanded it. The experience had strengthened both the people and the systems that sustained them, leaving them more resilient, confident, and united. For the children, the ordeal became a story of survival and courage. They had faced fear and uncertainty, yet they had been protected by humans acting with skill, intelligence, and compassion. The experience shaped their understanding of the world, teaching them the value of trust, cooperation, and courage. As they grew older, they would remember not only the fear they had endured, but also the extraordinary lengths humans went to safeguard them. In that sense, the mission became more than a rescue. It became a lesson, a legacy, and a source of inspiration. As weeks turned into months, humanity continued to integrate the lessons learned from the mission. Education systems incorporated the story as a study in moral courage, strategic planning, and the importance of protecting the innocent. Scientists refined technologies developed for the mission for broader applications, improving safety, communication, and preparedness. Leaders strengthened alliances, ensuring that support networks were ready to respond quickly to future crises. The rescue had revealed both vulnerability and strength, And humanity had taken deliberate steps to reinforce both. In every human world, there was a renewed sense of purpose. The mission had demonstrated that while threats could be unpredictable, humans could respond with precision, intelligence, and empathy. Every citizen, whether involved directly or indirectly, had witnessed the power of unity and moral clarity in action. Communities celebrated not just the return of the children, but the demonstration of what humanity could achieve when faced with extraordinary challenges. The mission became a touchstone for collective pride, ethical action, and the enduring strength of a species that valued life above all else. The captors, weakened and humiliated, retreated to reconsider their actions. Humanity's decisive response had proven that violations of innocence would not go unpunished, even if the intent had been curiosity rather than malice. Across the galaxy, other civilizations observed the events and adjusted their perceptions. Humans had proven that they were capable of both restraint and force, that they could act decisively without sacrificing morality, and that their unity made them formidable. The rescue mission had changed not just the immediate situation, but the broader understanding of humanity's place in the galaxy. Finally, in quiet moments, humans reflected on what had been accomplished. The children were safe, the families reunited, and the systems secure. Yet the mission had left an indelible mark. Humanity had faced a test unlike any in its history, and had emerged stronger, wiser, and more unified. The ordeal had reaffirmed the values that had sustained them for millennia: empathy, courage, cooperation, and moral clarity. It had also reminded them of the importance of vigilance, preparation, and the willingness to act decisively when circumstances demanded it. As the children returned to their daily lives, communities celebrated the extraordinary efforts that had brought them home. Every citizen, every leader, every participant in the mission had contributed to a story that would be told for generations, a story of courage, unity, and the unshakable commitment to protect innocence. Humanity had proven that even after thousands of years of peace, they were not powerless in the face of